Captain Sarah Mitchell gripped the control stick of her A-10 Thunderbolt as she cruised through the Afghan sky. Below her, the mountains looked like wrinkled brown paper stretching to the horizon. She had been flying combat missions for 3 years now, but every time she strapped into this beast of an aircraft, her heart still raced with the same excitement she'd felt on her first solo flight. Sarah was 32 years old. With sandy blonde hair she kept pulled back in a regulation bun, and green eyes that seemed to notice everything. She wasn't tall or particularly imposing, standing just 5'5" in her flight boots. But what she lacked in physical stature, she made up for in determination and skill. She had grown up on a cattle ranch outside of Alamogordo, New Mexico. Her father had wanted sons to help run the place, but he got Sarah instead. From the age of 6, she was up before dawn, feeding livestock, mending fences, and learning to fix anything that broke, which on a ranch was just about everything. Her father never said he was proud of her, but he taught her everything he knew. When she told him at 17 that she wanted to join the Air Force and become a pilot, he had laughed. Not a kind laugh, but the dismissive kind that said she was dreaming too big. "Girls don't fly fighter jets, Sarah," he had said, not looking up from the fence post he was hammering. "That's men's work. You should think about nursing or teaching." She had proven him wrong. Through grit and countless hours of study, she had earned her wings. The A-10 wasn't technically a fighter jet. It was a close air support aircraft, built around a massive 30mm cannon designed to destroy tanks. Some pilots called it ugly. Sarah called it beautiful. It was tough, reliable, and saved lives. Just like her, it didn't need to be pretty to get the job done. Back at Bagram Airfield, where her squadron was based, things weren't much easier than they had been growing up. She was one of only 3 female pilots in her unit, and some of the men never let her forget it. They didn't openly refuse to work with her. That would get them in trouble. But there were the jokes in the ready room that stopped when she walked in, the way some of them requested different pilots for missions when they could. The nickname they thought she didn't know about, Barbie in a cockpit. The worst was Captain Brad Hutchins, a F-16 pilot who seemed to think his fighter jet made him superior to everyone, especially A-10 pilots and especially Sarah. He was tall, good-looking in that all-American way, and came from a military family. His father was a retired colonel. His grandfather had flown in Vietnam. Brad acted like he was born wearing a flight suit, just yesterday in the chow hall. She had overheard him talking to a group of younger pilots. "I'm just saying, when you need real air power, you want an F-16. Not some slow-moving tank killer," Brad had said loudly, making sure his voice carried across the room. "And you definitely don't want someone who's worried about breaking a nail when things get hairy." Sarah had kept eating her meal, not giving him the satisfaction of a response. She had learned long ago that the best way to deal with men like Brad was to be better than them where it counted, in the sky. Her radio crackled to life, pulling her back to the present. "Hawkeye 3-2, this is Bagram Tower. We need you to return to base immediately. You're being reassigned to alert status." Sarah frowned. She was supposed to have another hour of patrol. "Bagram Tower, Hawkeye 3-2. Copy that? Any particular reason?" "That's classified, Captain." "Just get back here ASAP. Roger that." Hawkeye 3-2 returning to base. Sarah banked her aircraft and headed back toward Bagram. Alert status meant sitting in the cockpit or nearby, ready to launch at a moment's notice if troops on the ground needed help. It could mean waiting for hours, or it could mean immediate action. There was no way to know. When she landed and taxied to her hardened shelter, her crew chief, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, was waiting with a concerned look on his weathered face. Rodriguez was 54, had been working on aircraft since before Sarah was born, and treated her plane like it was his own child. "Captain, they want you in the Tactical Operations Center right away," Rodriguez said, helping her down from the cockpit. "Something big is brewing." Sarah grabbed her helmet bag and jogged across the flight line to the TOC, a fortified building where mission planning and coordination happened. Inside, the air conditioning was a shock after the heat outside. Her squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Davies, was waiting for her along with several other officers she didn't recognize. "Captain Mitchell, good," Davies said. He was a straight shooter in his late 40s with gray temples and a no-nonsense attitude. He had always treated Sarah fairly, judging her only on her performance. "We've got a situation developing. SEAL Team 7 is operating in the Tangi Valley, about 40 miles northwest of here. They were tracking a high-value target when they got ambushed. They're pinned down in a compound, taking heavy fire from multiple positions." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The Tangi Valley was notorious. Lots of places for insurgents to hide, difficult terrain, and a local population that wasn't always friendly. "What's their status?" she asked. "6 operators, 2 wounded," said one of the officers she didn't recognize. He wore a naval uniform, probably the SEAL liaison. "They've called for close air support, but here's the problem. The enemy is within 50 meters of their position, some even closer. This is danger close work, precision strikes only. We can't risk hitting our own guys." Sarah nodded. Danger close was exactly what the A-10 was built for. Her aircraft could fly slow and low, giving her time to identify targets and place her fire with surgical precision. "When do I launch?" she asked. The SEAL officer exchanged a glance with Davies. "Captain," the team leader specifically requested. "Well?" He asked if we had anyone else available. Sarah felt like she'd been slapped. "What?" "He heard a female pilot was on alert status," the officer continued, looking uncomfortable. "He said with all due respect that he'd prefer someone with more experience in this type of situation." The room went quiet. Sarah could feel everyone looking at her. Lieutenant Colonel Davies's jaw tightened. "Captain Mitchell has flown 73 combat missions, 32 of them danger close support. Her record is spotless. She's exactly the pilot we need for this." "I understand that, sir," the SEAL officer said. "But my team leader is under fire. If he wants—" "I don't care what he wants," Davies interrupted. "Captain Mitchell is the best close air support pilot I have. She's going." "End of discussion," he turned to Sarah. "Get back to your bird. You launch in 10 minutes. Call sign for the ground team is Dagger 7. Radio frequency will be uploaded to your data link. Sarah," she met his eyes. "Bring those boys home." "Yes, sir," Sarah said, and ran for the door. As she sprinted back across the flight line, her mind was already shifting gears. 6 men counting on her, 2 of them wounded, an enemy that was danger close, and a team leader who didn't think she could do the job. She'd dealt with doubters her whole life. Time to prove them wrong again. The A-10 shook slightly as Sarah pushed the throttles forward and lifted off from Bagram's runway. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the Hindu Kush Mountains. Rodriguez had done his usual perfect job. The aircraft was fully armed with 1,150 rounds of 30mm ammunition for her cannon, plus 2 AGM-65 Maverick missiles and 4 500-pound bombs under her wings. Sarah climbed to 8,000 feet and punched in the coordinates for the Tangi Valley. Her heads-up display showed it was a 20-minute flight. She used the time to study the terrain on her moving map display and prepare mentally for what was coming. The radio crackled. "Hawkeye 3-2, Dagger 7. How copy?" The voice was strained, and Sarah could hear gunfire in the background, the distinctive crack of AK-47s and the deeper boom of PKM machine guns. "Dagger 7, Hawkeye 3-2. I read you Lima Charlie. I'm 18 minutes out. Give me your situation." Sarah kept her voice calm and professional. "Hawkeye, we are 6 operators in a 2-story compound, grid November Echo 476283. We have 2 wounded, 1 critical. We're surrounded by enemy fighters in multiple buildings around us. Estimate 40 to 50 hostile forces. They're in the buildings north, east, and west of our position. We've got RPGs and heavy machine gun fire coming from all directions." Sarah could hear the stress in his voice, even though he was trying to hide it. SEALs were trained to stay cool under pressure, but when you were surrounded and taking fire, with wounded men depending on you, that training could only do so much. "Copy that, Dagger 7. I've got your position. Can you mark your building?" "Negative, Hawkeye. We use smoke. We just tell them exactly where we are. Our building is the only one with a blue door on the south side." "I say again, blue door, south side." "Roger, blue door, south side. What's your most immediate threat?" There was a pause, filled with more gunfire. Then, We've got a PKM machine gun team in a building about 60 meters north of us. Second floor, east window. They've got us pinned. Down every time we try to move our wounded to better cover. We need that gun gone first. Understood. I'm going to need positive identification before I engage. The moment you hear my aircraft, I need you to pop smoke so I know exactly where you are, even if the bad guys see it too. Your lives depend on me knowing your exact position. Confirm you understand. Another pause. When the SEAL spoke again, his voice had an edge to it. Hawkeye, we were told we'd be getting Captain Mitchell. Is that you? Here it comes, Sarah thought. Affirmative, Dagger 7. I'm Captain Mitchell. With all due respect, ma'am. He paused, and Sarah could almost hear him choosing his words carefully. This is an extremely tight situation. The enemy is close. Really close. I need to know you can do this. Sarah took a breath. She had two choices. She could get angry, or she could be professional. Only one of those choices would save lives. Dagger 7. I've flown 32 danger close missions. I know how to do my job. Right now, you've got wounded men, and you're surrounded. I'm the help that's coming, and I'm damn good at what I do, so you can trust me. Or you can die waiting for someone else. Your choice, but make it fast, because I'm 15 minutes out. Silence on the radio. Then, understood, Hawkeye. We'll pop smoke when we hear you. Good. Stay alive, Dagger 7. I'm coming. Sarah pushed her aircraft a little faster. The Tangi Valley appeared ahead, a narrow cut between steep mountains. The area was a patchwork of small compounds with mud brick walls, separated by irrigation ditches and small fields. Finding one building among dozens would be hard enough. Finding it while people were shooting at her would be harder. She began her descent, dropping to 3,000 feet above the valley floor. Her eyes scanned the landscape, looking for the compound cluster where the SEALs were trapped. Hawkeye 3-2, Dagger 7, we hear you? Sarah could indeed hear the distinct whine of her twin turbofan engines echoing off the valley walls. Dagger 7, pop smoke now. Through her canopy, Sarah saw a purple smoke grenade go off in one of the compounds. She immediately spotted the building with the blue door. It was in the center of a cluster of similar buildings, just like the SEAL had described. Mud brick walls, flat roofs. The building to the north was slightly taller, and she could see muzzle flashes coming from a second-floor window. Dagger 7, I've got purple smoke, I've got your blue door, and I've got eyes on your machine gun position. I'm coming in from the south. Keep your heads down. Sarah rolled her aircraft and began her attack run. The A-10 wasn't fast, but it was stable, perfect for this kind of work. She lined up on the building to the north, adjusted for wind, and began her dive. The building filled her heads-up display. She could see figures moving in the window, the barrel of the machine gun pointing toward the SEAL's position. Guns, guns, guns! She called over the radio, warning the SEALs that her cannon was firing. The A-10's Gu-8 Avenger cannon roared to life with its distinctive sound, like a giant zipper being ripped open. In 2 seconds, she fired 60 rounds of 30mm depleted uranium shells. The building's second floor simply disintegrated in a cloud of dust and debris. The machine gun went silent. Sarah pulled up hard, banking away from the valley walls. Good hits, the SEAL called. That gun is down. Dagger 7, where's your next threat? Building to our east, about 50 meters. Ground floor, multiple shooters with AKs and at least one RPG. Sarah climbed and circled around for another pass. As she did, she saw something that made her stomach tighten. Trucks were moving on the road from the west, reinforcements coming for the enemy fighters. She counted 3 vehicles, probably carrying a dozen or more fighters. Dagger 7, be advised, you've got vehicles approaching from the west, 3 trucks. Probably more bad guys. Copy that, Hawkeye. They're trying to finish us before dark. How much playtime do you have? Sarah checked her fuel. In combat, you burned through fuel fast. About 45 minutes, then I have to return to base. 45 minutes. The SEAL's voice was grim. Then we'd better make them count. Take out those vehicles first. If they get here, we're done. Sarah didn't hesitate. On the way, she rolled in on the approaching trucks. They were driving fast down a dirt road, throwing up plumes of dust. The lead truck had what looked like a heavy machine gun mounted in the back. She selected one of her Maverick missiles, locked onto the lead vehicle, and fired. The missile streaked away from her wing, trailing smoke. 2 seconds later, the truck exploded in a ball of orange flame. The 2 vehicles behind it skidded to a stop. Men began pouring out of them, running for cover in the surrounding fields. Sarah made another pass with her cannon, raking the stopped trucks. One of them exploded, its fuel tank igniting. The third truck tried to reverse, but Sarah put a burst through its engine block. It rolled to a stop, smoke pouring from under its hood. "Scratch 3 vehicles," Sarah reported. "Outstanding shooting. Hawkeye!" For the first time, the SEAL sounded almost cheerful. "Now, if you can clear that building to our east, we might be able to get to our extract point." "Roger that. Lining up now." For the next 30 minutes, Sarah worked methodically. She hit the building to the east with her cannon. She used her bombs on 2 more buildings where the SEALs spotted enemy positions. Each time, she made sure she had positive identification. Each time, she placed her fire precisely. Not once did she come close to hitting the friendly position. The sun was getting lower. Her fuel was getting low. But the enemy fire was slacking off. The survivors were breaking contact, running away from the compound rather than toward it. "Dagger 7, Hawkeye 3-2. I'm at Bingo Fuel. I've got maybe 10 minutes left on station." "Copy that, Hawkeye. We're preparing to move to our extract point now. It's about 300 meters south of our current position. Can you give us cover?" "Affirmative. I'll orbit overhead. Anyone shoots at you, I'll light them up." Moving now. Sarah circled overhead, her eyes scanning for any threat. She watched through her targeting pod as 6 figures emerged from the building with the blue door. 2 of them were being helped by the others, the wounded. They moved quickly but carefully through the compound, heading south. Suddenly, muzzle flashes erupted from a building Sarah had thought was clear. Bullets kicked up dust around the SEALs. "Contact east!" the SEAL shouted. Sarah was already rolling in. She put a 3-second burst through the building's wall. The firing stopped immediately. "Keep moving, Dagger 7. I've got your back." The SEALs reached a clearing where a helicopter could land. They set up a defensive perimeter and waited. Sarah circled above them until she heard the beautiful sound of helicopter rotors. 2 Blackhawks appeared, flying low and fast up the valley. They landed, and the SEALs loaded aboard quickly. Within 60 seconds, both helicopters were lifting off and heading east toward safety. "Hawkeye 3-2, Dagger 7. All souls are aboard, and we are clear. I don't know how to thank you. You saved our lives today." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her, but she kept her voice steady. "Just doing my job, Dagger 7. Glad you're safe." "Ma'am, I was wrong. About you. You're one hell of a pilot. I'm sorry for doubting you. Apology accepted. Now get those wounded men home. Hawkeye 3-2 is RTB." Sarah turned her aircraft toward Bagram. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains orange and purple. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and noth. Sarah sat in the debriefing room, going over every detail of the mission with Lieutenant Colonel Davies and the intelligence officers. They had her gun camera footage playing on a screen, showing each engagement. The precision of her strikes was evident. Every round had hit exactly where she intended, with no collateral damage. "Textbook flying, Captain," Davies said when they finished. "You saved 6 lives today and probably prevented a significant propaganda victory for the enemy." "Well done," Sarah nodded, accepting the praise quietly. She was too tired for it to really sink in. All she wanted was a shower and her bunk. When she finally made it back to her quarters, a small plywood structure she shared with another female officer, it was nearly midnight. She took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the sweat and tension. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw the same person she'd always been. Nothing had changed, really. She'd done her job. That was all, but everything was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. The next morning, Sarah was awakened by someone pounding on her door. She glanced at her watch, 600 hours. She'd only been asleep for 4 hours. "Captain Mitchell, ma'am, you need to come with me. The colonel wants to see you immediately." Sarah threw on her uniform and followed the young airman across the base to the headquarters building. The airman led her not to Davies's office, but to a much larger conference room. Inside, she found not just her squadron commander, but a 2-star general she'd never met, several full colonels, and a group of civilians in suits. "Captain Mitchell, please sit down," the general said. His name tape read Morrison. He had a firm but not unkind face, weathered by years of service. Sarah sat, completely confused. "Sir, if I may ask, what's this about?" General Morrison leaned forward. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified. Last night, the SEAL team you rescued included Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander James Bradford. He's one of the most decorated SEALs in the Navy. He was also carrying highly classified intelligence about a planned attack on U.S. forces. Intelligence that would have been captured or destroyed if his team had been overrun." Sarah's eyes widened. She hadn't known who she was rescuing. To her, they were just 6 Americans who needed help. "The intelligence Commander Bradford was carrying has already been acted upon," the general continued. "We stopped a major attack that would have killed dozens of our people." "You didn't just save 6 SEALs, Captain. You saved potentially hundreds of lives." I just did what any pilot would do, sir." "Perhaps," one of the civilians said. He had a badge on his belt that Sarah couldn't quite see, but she guessed CIA or NSA. "But not many pilots could have done it as well as you did. We've reviewed your gun camera footage. Your precision was remarkable." General Morrison pulled out a folder. "Captain, because of the nature of this mission and what it prevented, there are going to be some significant consequences. First, you're being awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for your actions yesterday. Second, your story is going to become public. The Pentagon wants to use this as a good news story. Female pilot saves SEAL team, stops major attack. They think it's good for recruiting and public relations?" Sarah felt her stomach sink. "Sir, with respect, I'd rather not be made into some kind of poster child." "I'm just a pilot." "I understand that," the general said, and he sounded sympathetic. "But this is bigger than you or me. This decision is coming from Washington. There's going to be a press conference in 2 days. You'll be flown back to the States for it. Then you'll do a few interviews and return to duty." Sarah wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't matter. When the Pentagon made a decision, it was made. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. 2 days later, Sarah found herself standing in the Pentagon press briefing room, wearing her dress uniform with a Distinguished Flying Cross pinned to her chest. General Morrison stood beside her along with Lieutenant Commander Bradford, the SEAL team leader whose life she'd saved. Bradford was in his late 30s, with sharp features and the lean build of a man who'd spent his career in special operations. When they'd met earlier, he had taken her hand firmly and looked her in the eye. "Captain Mitchell, I owe you an apology and my life. I was wrong to doubt you. You're the best close air support pilot I've ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of pilots." "Thank you, Commander," Sarah had said. "I'm just glad everyone made it home." Now cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. General Morrison gave a brief account of the mission, leaving out the classified details. Then he opened it up for questions. "Captain Mitchell, how did it feel to know the SEAL team leader didn't want a female pilot?" a reporter asked. Sarah had been prepped for this question. I understood his concern. "When lives are on the line, everyone wants the best. My job was to prove that I was the best person for that mission. I think the results speak for themselves. Do you think you face discrimination as a female pilot?" "I think every woman in the military faces unique challenges," Sarah said carefully. "But the Air Force has given me every opportunity to succeed. What matters is skill, not gender." More questions followed. Most were respectful. Sarah handled them as well as she could, trying to shift credit to her crew chief, her squadron, and the maintenance personnel who kept her aircraft flying. When the press conference ended, Sarah thought the worst was over. She was wrong. The story exploded across the news. "Female pilot saves SEAL team" was the headline everywhere. Sarah's face was on the cover of magazines. Cable news shows debated women in combat. Some praised her as a hero. Others questioned whether she was being used for political purposes. Online, the comments ranged from supportive to viciously cruel. Sarah tried to ignore it all. She did the interviews she was required to do. Good Morning America, 60 Minutes, a few others. She answered the same questions over and over, trying to stay humble and professional. Then she returned to Afghanistan, hoping things would go back to normal. They didn't. When she got back to Bagram, everything was different. Some of the pilots treated her like a celebrity, asking for photos and autographs. Others resented the attention she was getting. The worst was Brad Hutchins. One evening, Sarah was in the ready room studying maps for an upcoming mission when Brad walked in with 2 other F-16 pilots. They were talking loudly, clearly wanting her to hear. "I'm just saying, it's not that hard to shoot at buildings when the enemy isn't shooting back at you," Brad said. "Try doing air-to-air combat at Mach 1. That takes real skill." "The SEALs seemed pretty grateful," one of the other pilots said. "Please," Brad scoffed. "Any pilot in this wing could have done what she did. She just got lucky that the Pentagon wanted a diversity win. Now she's America's sweetheart, and the rest of us are doing the real work in the shadows." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She forced herself to take a breath and keep studying her maps. "Don't let him get to you," she told herself. But Brad wasn't done. He walked over and stood in front of her desk. "Hey, Sarah, when you're done being famous, maybe you could actually fly some real missions again. Some of us are tired of picking up your slack." Sarah looked up at him slowly. "I've flown 8 missions since I got back, Brad. How many have you flown?" "Combat missions." "Not milk runs? Every mission I fly is a combat mission. Just because I'm not dropping bombs on empty desert doesn't mean I'm not doing my job." Brad leaned on her desk. "You know what I think? I think you got lucky one time, and now the Air Force is using you to prove a point. But we all know the truth. When things really go bad, when a real war starts, they'll want men in the cockpit. Not girls playing soldier." Something inside Sarah snapped. She stood up, getting right in Brad's face despite the fact that he was nearly a foot taller than her. "I have saved more lives in one mission than you'll save in your entire career," she said, her voice low and hard. "I have flown in combat conditions you can't imagine. I have proven myself over and over again, and I'm done trying to earn the respect of people like you. So you can either salute me when I outrank you someday, or you can spend your career being bitter that a woman is better at this job than you'll ever be. Your choice." The ready room had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching. Brad's face flushed red. For a moment, Sarah thought he might actually take a swing at her. Instead, he stepped back and forced a smile. "Easy there, Captain. I was just joking around." "Can't you take a joke?" "That wasn't a joke, Brad. That was disrespect. And if you ever speak to me that way again, I'll file a formal complaint. Now get out of my way. I have a mission to prepare for." Brad stalked out of the ready room, his friends following. As soon as they were gone, Sarah sat back down, her hands shaking. She had never confronted anyone like that before. It wasn't her style. But she was done being quiet. Lieutenant Colonel Davies appeared in the doorway. He'd clearly heard the whole thing. "Captain Mitchell, can I see you in my office?" Sarah followed him, expecting a reprimand. Instead, Davies closed the door and said, "That was a long time coming. Brad Hutchins has been a problem for a while. He's a good pilot, but he's got an attitude issue. I'm glad you stood up to him." "Sir, I probably should have handled that better." "Maybe, but sometimes people need to be put in their place." Davies sat down behind his desk. "Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you. This fame thing is a double-edged sword. Some people are going to resent you,